Hey everybody, Force here. So I've been thinking about making a few discussion videos, and the background behind it is that I've been asked a lot of questions over the last few years, and I like to address them in a more compact format than written text. And for this video I'm gonna talk about one of the most, if not the most, asked about topic, which is reading and what it entails. So let's begin with what is reading. Reading is seeing circles and understanding what you're seeing. The order of the notes, how to play it, speed changes, etc. You could say it's like reading a book. And being able to read it means being able to understand the words and sentences and what they are trying to convey. Continuing with this analogy, trying to read something with the easy mode, when you're not used to it, is like reading a book in a foreign language, which uses an alphabet you know. You kind of see what's going on and can maybe read it out loud, but you can't necessarily understand the meaning. You're completely hopeless until you start looking up the words in a dictionary to understand the meaning itself. Now that we've got the definition out of the way, we'll get to what influences the difficulty of reading. There are two aspects. The first one is the most obvious one, the approach rate. The approach rate controls the node density of the map, which is a fancy way of saying how many nodes you see at any given time. The node density also gets influenced by the map's BPM. It is what a lot of people call artificial difficulty. You can make a rather easy map for today's standards obscenely hard to play just by lowering the approach rate. And the easy mode, for example, only increases difficulty in terms of node density, which, as you probably already know, is enough to make a map incredibly hard for, I'd say, at least 99% of most players. And the second aspect, which makes reading harder, is the map itself. Well, obviously the map also plays a big role. Each map has patterns in it, whereas some might be harder to read than others. This is called pattern complexity and might be subjectively or objectively harder. The sheer amount of patterns make playing a lot of different maps so valuable. One of the easier patterns or sequences of circles would be in a standard drum and bass song. Take note of the constant spacing between each circle and the stack streams, which also don't change spacing or direction at all, or at least in most cases. Then take a HoloWings map or a Fanson map as an extreme counterexample. You have so many spacing differences, which you have to keep up with, that this itself becomes a challenge. Now, the actual reading difficulty is the combination of those patterns plus the approach rate. And yeah, as a side note, hidden also makes reading harder, but this one is more subjective as it also reduces clutter on your screen. There are people who can only play with hidden, and then there are people who cannot play hidden at all. It kind of goes both ways. To recap, we know what reading is and where its difficulty comes from. So now, why would you need reading? What's the purpose? Well, this is the blurry part of it, because you can't necessarily quantify reading unless you're only talking about the approach rate. This makes measuring the use and results of reading quite hard. However, despite that problem, you can still see trends in players who are really good at reading compared to those who are not. And one of these trends is consistency. Why would you need consistency? Well, at least this question is a lot easier to answer. Consistency helps you all around. You get more confident if you keep seeing maps consistently, which might make you perform better because OS is quite dependent on your mental state. Also, having good consistency helps making insane plays possible, or at least feel possible. However, take note that consistency itself is not only reading. You could say it's the sum of every aspect of OS mixed together and how well it harmonizes. If you can't consistently stream a BPM, you're probably gonna trip over your fingers and miss. So if any aspect is being left behind, your consistency will suffer. Reading and aim also intertwine with each other. A lack of one might make the other aspect look worse than it really is. If your aim is on point, but you just can't make out at which point to look at properly, you're still gonna miss. And no amount of reading is going to save you from missing when you're changing your entire setup. It will help, but don't expect miracles. So reading helps you become better as a player. How would you go about it and practice it? Now, as I mentioned previously, you have two aspects: the approach rate / node density and pattern complexity. Practicing node density is the easiest aspect, but might be the most frustrating one, as you can practice this one by just lowering the approach rates on maps you already know. The higher the BPM, the lower the approach rate, the more dense the map becomes. That's the general gist of it. But caution, there are some maps where higher BPM map only uses 1/3 nodes or even 1/2 nodes. Just use your own judgment in a case-by-case scenario. And for the pattern complexity, I'd say the best way to practice it would be playing as many maps as possible. You can't possibly scrape even just the surface of all available patterns by just going through a handful of songs. Also, don't be afraid of retrying a lot if you flat out cannot do something. Retrying is not necessarily a bad thing. For example, every player who started playing the easy mod did have to memorize and retry a lot for his first few easy scores. Only after time you have to retry less and less for the same results. Retry until you get it down once, then practice it over a longer period to get it down consistently every time. You can apply this to basically everything in those. Also, take note that I'm just using the easy mod as an extreme example to make it as clear as possible. I'm not trying to advocate to everyone that they should be playing easy. It's just easier saying easy mod than saying 240 BPM and approach rate 9.0. But to clarify once again, yes, you can start playing easy mod and get better at reading that way, but no, it is definitely not necessary. I'd say approach rate 9 on a high enough BPM should be plenty of node density. Easy mod and approach rates under 8 are for people who are gigantic masochists, including me. For some finishing words, I'd like to repeat again that reading might not be the only problem you have, or might not even be the problem for your lack of consistency. But from what I've seen over the years, it was one of the most prevalent problems, and is still today. If there are any questions or feedback or suggestions for other discussion topics, feel free to leave them in the comments below. Also, I'll try my best to point out errors in case any are found, which there might be some present because I usually think, structure my thoughts and write about these topics at pretty much 2 AM. So thanks for watching and happy circle clicking.